This is a rice exchange with me, Bosi Domofayi, here in Lagos. Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has just made a presidential address to the country. And this is the first of such address to the nation since the announcement of two key reforms of fuel subsidy payments removal and the move to unify the central bank's exchange rate between late May and the first week of June. Okay, let's get down now to our guest in Abuja studios. Paul Alaje is the senior economist at SPM Professionals and a public policy analyst. He's standing by to dig through the president's speech as well as some other developing stories. Good evening. Great to see you with us here on the show tonight. Paul Alaje.
Good evening, and thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. A few minutes ago, Mr. President finished speaking, and he spoke broadly around what you can call palliatives and measures to ameliorate the full impact of both the fuel subsidy removal as well as the unification of exchange rate. He said the previous administration did not make provisions for fuel subsidy beyond June 2023, and there was no soft landing provided. Give me your thoughts on the presidential address.
Well, I think the president has tried to bring something relatively better than what was brought before, talking about the 8,000 palliatives. Of course, it was generally rejected by many economists and economic watchers around our country. Today, I've seen the president now talk about support for micro businesses, talking about support with about 50,000 to 1,300 of them. He has also mentioned support for SMEs, and addressing that to about 100,000 units of SMEs in Nigeria, between 500 to 1 million people. Then for large businesses, he said there will be 75 billion, 1 billion each to these relatively large businesses in our country. And he also mentioned that for food shortage, there will be release of strategic reserve of about 200,000 metric ton, and mentioned 50 billion naira to go into the support of agri, especially talking about rice as well as cassava, and also said we're going to support farmers with fertilizers. We are seeing relatively different energy from the president compared to what was mentioned earlier regarding cash transfer. He mentioned infrastructure support for states. He mentioned a number of things that he said between now, mostly by March next year, most of these would be a reality. So it's a better position than the position that we were at the time, as I think earlier this month, when the plan was to support just 10 million, 12 million homes with about 8,000 naira. Of course, we had said that will not go anywhere. So, but with this presentation, I believe more is to be done, and this one I think should just be the beginning of a better days ahead.
Well, you believe this is the start of better days ahead. Mr. President, as for in the address, is this address in line with your expectations in terms of what is being spent, where it's being spent? Do you think some of these measures perhaps could have come forward or should have come first before the removal of subsidy as well as the unification of exchange rate?
I granted an interview with you when the president was elected and before he was sworn into office as the president of Nigeria. And I was very clear as to if you want to build a road, there will be a diversion, alternative means for people. Unfortunately, that was not in the plan. I had mentioned that before subsidy is removed, refineries should work. Till today, that still remains my position. Without having substantial refineries to replace subsidy, we will spend money, about 500 billion is what the president is looking at. We're just trying to make the best out of the horrible situation that we have found ourselves. So I also hope that instead of looking at next year, about 9 months, that is a long time. People can take hope to take breakfast, but that hope will not last when it comes to dinner. That is, when the hope is deferred, there are a lot of concerns. For people to wait between now and March, I think it's a relatively long period of time. And I think that, before now, before subsidy is gone, announcement was made, some of these plans should have been in place so that by now, the buses, which of course we have direct immediate impact, and I'm talking of not less than 300,000 buses that is required to really ameliorate the concerns that subsidy removal alone has meted on the people. Two, We have not heard so much regarding what happens to exchange rates, because Naira is susceptible to devaluation. When that happens, will fuel prices increase again? If it increases, to how much? Will there be another palliative? Remember that within less than 2 months, we have seen oil price, PMS, increase from over 500 to now over 600. When will there be that long run? I understand the president sympathizes with everybody, Nigerians especially, regarding the hardship, the pain, the penury, the concern that we are all going through. And for the promise he made, for me, this is the first time I'm seeing relatively tangible thing being presented on the table for Nigeria. But will it be sufficient for Labour to say they will put the strike on hold, as is being expected by them? I'm talking of NLC. Will it be okay for TUC to say we will take a stop, will we consider a stop regarding strike they propose, they will go on next week? And earlier in the day,
actually the strike, Paul, the strike is actually scheduled for Wednesday, the 2nd of August, by the way. But again, just quickly to look at that, part of this, what the president just released, just said in his broadcast, that it says, quote, "We're also monitoring the effects of the exchange rate and inflation on gasoline prices. If and when necessary, we will intervene." Let me read that again. It says, "We're also monitoring the effects of the exchange rate and inflation on gasoline prices. If and when necessary, we will intervene." What do you think Mr. President meant by that statement?
Well, we will go back to the, we have floating rates, we have fixed rates, we also have managed floating. So if it becomes necessary, which I think in no time, that will be necessary, government may also bring back what you may want to call another subsidy regime, because there is no shortcut. It's either you allow your people to face the hardship by paying from their pocket while government make more revenue. In terms of sales from crude, sales from PMS, government makes all the money and use it to deploy on infrastructure or recurrent expenditure.
Paul, do you think it's going to be a subsidy regime? Do you think the subsidy regime will be back, or the government will perhaps set aside a certain rate, exchange rate, for petrol products by the central bank, in which we're going back to that regime in which we have a special rate for those who want to import fuel at subsidized rate? That will come subsidy again, in the manner of speaking, perhaps coming with a different arrangement. What do you think?
But from what you just said, it's a form of subsidy.
Yes.
If the true official rate is X, and we are saying that X minus an amount is what we are fixing, it's subsidy in economy. You see, when you hear unification, what we have seen in Nigeria is devaluation. We can use English and terms to explain those, but in the real sense, what are economics calling? Why would an economist interpret this? What we saw was depreciation, and what we will likely see is a subsidy either in the FX market or in the purchase of, what do we call it now, of PMS. So what you will see by that statement simply means government will intervene, which is important to do. But if you are still going to come back to intervention, why are we going this long path in the first instance? These are questions I think we hope answers will be provided to in the coming period.
Well, the government also today announced some palliatives for students of universities down to colleges of education, bus provisions for students, maybe some cash transfers, as that statement earlier today from Alaje's office said on behalf of the government, as well as removal of restrictions on students' loan. In that particular statement, it was said that institutions of government, universities or other institutions should not raise fees and any other fees. At least they should suspend them or put them on hold for now. What's your take on all of that?
Well, this is, for me, I think it's a very good one, because you cannot be dealing with inflation at over 22%, very close to 23%, and we are still increasing prices. I think that office should also extend this beyond just the monies that will be given to university or higher institution students. We must also do something that has sporadic effects on inflation, which is the price of electricity. The discourse have united in asking government to allow them increase prices. For us not to go back to square zero or not to fall deep into economic mess or in an economic quagmire, that must not be allowed, at least for the next 9 months, because the impact of what we are feeling now may be with us at least for the next 24 months. But hopefully, with some of the things government said it will roll out, and I am expecting more, like when I started this conversation, because when you look at people that are MSME, according to the Central Bank of Nigeria, we have over 14 million of them. What government is targeting is 100,000. That is a very minute fraction, but it's something. It does not mean we have not done anything. And I'm not saying that we can cater for the whole 14 million of them at once, but this could be a first batch government is looking at. But more importantly, what government is intending to do is to solve some of the challenges we have now and ensure that our economy is not affected or injured by another policy. And a potential danger ahead of us is what I just mentioned. If we increase the prices, I can tell you, inflation, whether reported or not, will not go less than 30%. Poverty, whether reported or not, will not go less than 12 million. I am hopeful the authorities will heed to this. The same way I spoke about subsidy. I said when subsidy is removed, SHS is unified or devalued together, we are going to see a major economic hardship. It's less than 3 months I made that comment. Today, it's becoming a reality. Another one authority must be careful of is the cost of electricity in homes must remain the same, at least for the next 9 months, before any major review must be entertained. And I'm very hopeful the authority will do the needful so that we don't fall into another economic quagmire and start looking for solution again and again.
Well, Paul, from where we are right now, the labor unions, we're back to that conversation. They're getting up for a nationwide strike from Wednesday. But what do you see ahead? Do you think, Mr. President, what his address really made tonight spoke to the heart of what the labor would want to see happen? Do you think it is a hope? What you could call a promissory note, in the manner of speaking in the financial terms, the kind of promissory note that the labor can hold on to. Mr. President, praise some companies that have, some banks, for example, last week announced that they are raising salaries for staff, and he praised them very well. He said, thank you very much for doing that. He also said in the statement just a few minutes ago that the new minimum wage, a wage review for civil servants is on the way. So do you think all this put together in a basket is enough to get the NLC to have a meeting again and say, look, perhaps we need to stay back and do not hold this particular nationwide strike? Is this in anybody's interest right now to have a nationwide strike, by the way?
Well, I believe that the president has just mentioned what government will do, and the timeline given is between now and March 2024. I don't think Labour will want to accept that. Based on the communication we have received from Labour in recent time, Labour seems to be expecting a difference now. Short-term solution, not medium-term, not a solution that will come in the future. Labour is expecting that perhaps buses will start running on CNG already. Labour is perhaps expecting that government would have collaborated with some of the transport companies already. That is not coming on the media. And the president has said, well, maybe because it's going to take time to import some of this equipment into Nigeria. Is it reasonable then? But I would,
Paul, is it reasonable then for Labour to make all these demands for a president who is coming into office just 60 days?
Honestly, I can tell you that we may say it is not reasonable, but the question is, government is a continuum. Government is a continuum. If you say that government is, and I tell you that, you see, if another government has done this, the chances are high that people might have taken it differently. But for me as a person, I believe this is a new government. Let's give this government a chance. Let's see how government will do these things differently. That is my opinion. That is my personal opinion. That is how I view the current administration. It's an administration that is trying to get a lot of things correctly and doing it. But how much can we tell someone who is hungry to defy his hunger? For how long will he have to wait? For how long will it take?
Let's defer the conversation at this particular point. Paul, let's take a very quick break. We need to take a break. Paul, Alaje, at this time, stand by there in Abuja studios. We'll continue the conversation after this. We can't defer this break. We need to take it right now. We're back, everyone, in 2. Yeah, we're back on a Rice Exchange with Paul Alaje, senior economist and public policy analyst, live from Abuja studios. We're unpacking President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's presidential address. Just finished a few moments ago. President Tinubu spoke extensively, read about 37-paragraph statement, and at the end he says, "Let me get back to work. I've got to make this reform work." That sounds like a business and investment man. But of course, he spoke extensively about what is being done in the space of agriculture, social interventions, and how to move things forward. And he appealed to everyone to please understand the necessity of time to build the bridge between policy reforms as well as the fruitage of implementation. So let me get back to you, Paul Alaje. So Mr. President, in that speech, spoke about the lag, the time lag between when you make a policy reform announcement, you put them in place, and when the implementation will come. So technically, he's asking Nigerians to be patient with him. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's what the president said summarily. He has shown us what the end will look like in terms of support and palliatives that government have in plan, but he said that some of these things cannot be done immediately, but Nigerians should wait. The question is, will Nigerians be willing to wait? And you can put Nigeria into groups. Will the middle class be willing to wait? Will the rich be willing to wait? More importantly, 133 million people living in multidimensional poverty. What is the impact of current policies on them? Will they be willing to wait? Over 90 million people living below poverty line, according to the World Bank report 27 June 2023. Will they be willing to wait? World Bank is warning that if these policies that to ameliorate some of the concerns that policies have brought on people before September, that by December 2023, 7.1 million fresh poor people will join the poverty bracket. These are concerns that authorities, especially international organizations such as World Bank, has brought to the fore regarding what may happen. But like the president said, we cannot convert policy policy and policy implementation into policy plan and implementation. We cannot make the two happen the same day. There is certainly need for time for government to do this. And that time is now the question, will Nigerians be willing to wait? And if they must wait, for how long exactly will they wait? What happens if Naira gets devalued? If in international market, price of crude goes up? Will it not affect the pump price in Nigeria? Okay, if it does, what does it mean? If fuel price go up, for instance, what does it mean? Does it mean that government will introduce subsidy again? Have we been able to provide true solution to concerns of subsidy and subsidy removal as we have it today?
Okay, so in the middle of all of these palliatives in the agri sector, and he spoke extensively, I'm sure you talk about that, billions and billions of naira that will help cultivate more maize, more rice, and more maize, for example, bring out about 200,000 metric tons from strategic reserves to feed the country, and all of that. So those were very good news. But again, over the weekend was that announcement from the Office of the President that a special prosecutor for the Central Bank of Nigeria and a few other government entities have been announced in the person of Jim Obaze, a former chief executive officer of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. What do you make of that?
Well, what I make of it is the investigation, it depends on what is it that we're investigating. Is it central bank as an entity, or is it the policies of central bank, or are we talking about the processes? If we are talking about the policy of central bank, then we have a number of concerns as to the independence of central bank itself. If it has to do with procurement of items in central bank and we are bringing transparency, then that would be really a welcome development. But if we are talking regarding the policy at the central bank, then the question will be, what signal are we sending to investors that we are trying to woo into the country as to the independence of our Apex Bank? That may not completely align with some of the vision and goals of government, even as we have it now. So, but importantly, the thing to be investigated has not been mentioned, is not in the public domain yet. So it will be tough to say that government will cross the line. But there is that tiny line that, yes, independence of central bank is important as regard the policies that comes out from the central bank. Because at a time, whatever central bank is saying, even though I criticized some of those policies at that time, and I remember that I had that conversation with you, but there was a president in sitting who agreed and gave a nod to some of those policies that central bank had made. So now, if you are checking, are we talking about the entity called central bank, or are we talking about the policies that central bank have made, or are we talking of processes of central bank? So some, I believe, government will always have an interest, especially as it affects processes, with the laid down procedure. For instance, procurement, were they followed? If they were not followed, who is culpable? Questions will be asked. But if that is not the case, if you are looking into the policy, if you are looking into the entity, then there are concerns whether central bank is still independent as we have it in its act.
We thank you sincerely for your time, as always. Thank you so much, Paul Alaje, senior economist at SPM Professionals and a public policy analyst. Thank you so much for drilling down to the president's address and some of the latest developments. We appreciate your time.